Hi everyone, this is Carol Ann Speaks, the state of our world on Thursday, September 24th, 2020. Well, what is it? That's a little complicated. We still have the coronavirus. As of early this evening, we had 7,454 confirmed cases in the U.S. And we also had 203,828 people who have passed away from this virus. That is a real tragedy. This did not need to happen because of mismanagement by President Trump and his administration. Wear your mask whenever you're out in public. Only go out when you need to, like to go to the grocery store, the drugstore, or the doctor. And practice social distancing, 6 feet apart from anyone. Okay? Also, this virus is not spread by touching something that a infected person has touched. It also spreads through the air. So wear that mask, practice social distancing, only go out when you need to, and get tested if you can. That'll help. Get a lot of tests, and we need the government to provide all the personal protective equipment needed in hospital equipment, like ventilators and respirators, and we also need the federal government to make sure we have all the tests we need. Everyone should be tested. They need to keep records of who is tested, what the result was, test positive, test their contacts, isolate them, quarantine them, get them well. Any contacts test positive, trace their contacts, get them well, quarantine them, etc. So that's the drill. That's what we have to do. We also have to protect the vulnerable people who are farm workers, agricultural workers, those in detention centers seeking asylum, jails and prisons, those in retirement homes, assisted living homes, nursing homes, and veterans homes, and those who do not have a home. They either live on the street or they live in shelters. And we also have to protect first responders, essential workers, healthcare workers, and really, and Native Americans on Indian reservations have been really hard hit by this. Do you know that there are Indian reservations where they do not have running water and electricity? Yep, that's a fact. So they are the first peoples, and they deserve a lot better. Now, the other day, we were talking about the case of the federal government in 1960s deciding to sterilize females in prisons, and in current days, the federal government decided to sterilize females or silence them because they're not criminals. In both cases, because they don't want these women to have children, and then for the federal government have to provide food and housing and health care for them. Very, very weird. And this is the pro-life party, you know. Okay, now, another thing we touched on was refugees. All over the world there are refugees created by wars. People flee the violence, flee the wars. Or if there's no real war, but there's just violence, like El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. Very brutal regimes there that our government supports, unfortunately. And those people are fleeing. And they come here for a better life. Also, we have other countries in Latin America that have issues, like Colombia and Nicaragua, and Brazil. Brazil is really up there. Brazil is a Portuguese country. Portugal made them a colony, and they have this leader, Bolsonaro, who is not indigenous, who does not take the virus seriously, just like our President Trump, and who thinks it's okay if the indigenous peoples get the virus and die. He's he's committing genocide against the indigenous people in his country. And our country is too, because this virus has really hit the not only poor people, but people who are essential workers, and they're most liable to have. They're out there doing their work, and they're very likely to come down with the virus because they're coming in contact with everyone, and they have to come in contact with people who are not wearing a mask, not practicing social distancing. So anyway, the same thing's happening here. So if you can afford to stay in your ivory tower to do your work, and you don't have to go out and meet up with anyone and mingle with anyone, and that you're telling people they have to go back to work, well, why don't you go back to work on the outside and see what it's like? Teachers should not return to the classroom until it's safe to do so, to keep the kids, the staff, and the teachers safe. Now, so that's really important. We're talking about refugees. Like Syria has a lot of refugees. Refugees were created after World War One. Before World War One, we had the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire became modern-day Turkey, and they were defeated by the Allied forces. You know, the British, the French, and the Italian. And the British, the French, and Italian created arbitrary countries. They created Syria and Lebanon and Libya. So anyway, they created these arbitrary countries with leaders, native leaders, people who lived in those countries, who would make them leaders, so that these colonial powers would always have what they need in terms of resources from these countries. And they created a Palestine mandate. That was through the UN. And when the United States and the Israeli Jewish people and the Palestinians, who can be Christian or Muslim, have been sharing the land that became Israel officially in 1948, and that land was the UN, the League of Nations, did some work there, but basically that land was promised to both people and peoples. And the Israeli Jewish people say their claim to the land goes back to 2,000 years prior, and that then the land that was created based on those claims, it's a very old claim, that they had the right to the land. And when Israel was created officially as a country, as a nation, that land was populated by people who lived there at the time. They were Arab peoples, Muslim and Christian. And when Israel was created officially as a country, the Israeli Jewish people really wanted a country of their own. They didn't want these other people. So they encouraged them to leave in various ways. And those who stayed, they isolated them. Israel had a certain amount of land, and the Palestinians had a certain amount of land. But Israel had wars after the 1948 creation of their state, where they gradually took more of the land of the Palestinians. Eventually, Israel did build a separation wall with the West Bank to stop people who were coming into their country and bombing everything. And the Palestinians were just trying to get their homes back. And both the Israeli Jewish people and the Palestinians did commit acts of violence in their quest to have their homeland, their nation. And the Israeli government that was created was mainly for the Jewish residents. They did everything they could to discourage the non-Jewish people to leave. A lot of those people did go to other countries. They went to the British Isles, they came to the U.S., etc. And those that stayed were treated as second-class citizens. At some point, the Israeli government did build a separation wall to cut down on Palestinians coming over and committing violence. They built settlements for Jewish residents in parts of what was supposed to be Palestine. So there's in the West Bank, they built settlements and encouraged their Jewish residents to go move there. And in Gaza, they did the same thing. That eventually gave Gaza their independence, but the whole philosophy was that Israel is for the Jewish people and not these other people. So the policies against the non-Jewish people were very harsh. You had to get a permit if you wanted to build a house, and if you didn't get the right permit, the house could be demolished. And more recent times, with this pandemic about the coronavirus, many Palestinians have lost their home because Israel has demolished their home. Israel demolishes homes as a way of encouraging Palestinians to leave. Our country, the United States, has been giving money to Israel since Israel became a country, giving lots of money. And they have a little bit of money to the Palestinians. And don't say very much about the policies of Israel towards the Palestinians. So it's very uneven treatment of these people. So it is really a problem. There have been various attempts to solve it. It's not going to get solved anytime soon, but we really need to have a more even-handed approach because both peoples deserve a home, but not at the expense of the other. The best solution in my mind is for the Israeli Jewish or Hebrew people to share the land with the Palestinians who are Christian and Muslim, and everyone has equal rights. But then it's no longer a Jewish state, which is what the Jewish Israelis want, because the non-Jewish people would outnumber the Jewish people. So it's a real problem. I don't know how to solve it, but we can talk about that in the future meetings. Also, one thing I forgot to mention the other day is that some of the legislation that was passed by the U.S. House of Representatives provided $1 billion to provide masks and other protective equipment for the people. And somehow, for the people in the U.S., because masks are in short supply, and other personal protective equipment. But somehow, the Pentagon got a hold of these funds, got the funds appropriated to them. I have no idea how they do that, and they ended up spending this money on military equipment. So that's a real tragedy. They took away money that's supposed to be used to fight the coronavirus to create more weapons of war. It's widely known now. People are aware of it. So hopefully they'll be able to restore that money to provide the health care and equipment needed and get it out of these weapons. So anyway, that's what's going on there. Now, that's a busy news day. Also, we have an election coming up in November. Make sure you're registered to vote. Get a mail-in ballot if your state allows that. And return it as soon as you can. Post office is also being messed with by Trump and his people. So, best healthy thing to do is to vote by mail. Become familiar with the candidates and the issues on your ballot so you can make a nice informed decision. Okay, now we still have all this racial strife going on since George Floyd was murdered a few months ago by a white police officer in Minnesota. So there's a golden rule or proverb that says, do unto others as you have them do unto you. So keep that in mind the way you treat people. Okay, maybe it's time for a little song. Let's have a little song now. The song I'd like to sing is, okay, why don't we sing, Alright, here's a song about my Aunt Charlotte. Here we go. My aunt took care of my brother and I when my mom had to go to work. She also had a son to raise at the time, and she took care of all three. We all lived in New York City, my mom and us and my aunt and her family. We spent a lot of time together. I remember it well. I did not appreciate her all the time because I was just a kid. But now when I look back upon those times and the later years, I know I had a great aunt. Now I wish she were here with me, but I know that cannot be. So I'll go on with my story. She loved to be busy and have a good time. She always thought of her family. She always put her family first, and then she could not take care of herself. Then came the day when my mom and I moved to California. My aunt was upset that we were leaving, but we said we would see them often. My mom and my aunt would talk on the telephone every Sunday morn. Sometimes I would talk as well, and we saw them as much as we could. My aunt always talked about her family, her son, his wife, and then her grandkids. My mom would listen and talk about her, and the years went by. She had what it takes to be a good mom. She always thought of her family. She always put her family first, and then she could not take care of herself. Okay, hope you liked it. That's Aunt Charlotte. Now, and this is a true story. Now, I'd like you to take care of yourself and take care of others. Thanks for tuning in this evening, September 24th, 2020, for Meeting with Carolyn Speaks with Save the World. Hope you come back and visit with us again tomorrow evening. And remember to take care of yourself, take care of others, and remember, kindness goes a long way. Kindness goes a very long way. Stay safe. Thank you. Good night.